Hey guys, I'm Christopher with Health and Fitness The Truth. There's a lot being said all the time about carbs. You have to limit or avoid them, you should only eat the good ones, but they're delicious. So let's talk about carbs. Okay, you've heard the keto and paleo doctrine that in order to lose weight or even live a proper nutritional lifestyle, you will have to limit or completely avoid carbohydrates. It's often talked about that way. But it seems to me that when proponents of those lifestyles are talking about carbohydrates, it seems like they're really talking about grain. And it seems like when they're talking about grain, they're really talking about wheat. When they get into the nitty-gritty, they include other grains, but probably just because wheat is the most abundant, typical go-to for Americans, they seem to single out wheat. And so we get this dramatic oversimplification of what carbohydrates are. We all tend to think that it means wheat. But like I said, that's a dramatic oversimplification. It doesn't reflect the truth of the complexity of what carbs are. So the truth is, if it grows, then its basic organic structure is that of a carbohydrate, almost all the time. So this, of course, includes grains, yes, but it also includes vegetables and fruits. And nobody's banning vegetables or fruits. Why not? They're carbohydrates. Let's give you some science. So one of the three basic macronutrients, including proteins and fats, carbohydrates, is a macronutrient that has an organic chemical structure including carbon as the backbone, as with all organic structures, and oxygen and hydrogen. And the oxygen and hydrogen that exists in carbohydrates exists at a ratio similar to water, 2 hydrogens for every oxygen. So that's what you're looking at chemically with any carbohydrate. Now there are 4 basic types of carbohydrates. All of them end in the word saccharide, and that is just because the English language is odd in that it pulls from every other language in order to make its language. And saccharide is the Greek word for sugar. So we have monosaccharides, mono of course being 1, so 1 sugar. We have disaccharides, 2 sugars. We have oligosaccharides, meaning a few sugars. And we have polysaccharides, meaning many sugars, but all bonded together. In the case of monosaccharides, you're looking at the smallest possible molecule that can function as a carbohydrate. And there are 3 basic monosaccharides, also called simple sugars. They are fructose and glucose and galactose. And all 3 of these exist naturally in whole, clean foods such as fruits and vegetables, honey, of course, sugar beets and sugar cane. If you bond 2 of those monosaccharides together, if you create a chemical bond between them, what you get is a disaccharide. If you put glucose and fructose together, then you get sucrose. If you put glucose and galactose together, you get lactose. And if you put a glucose and another glucose and bond them together, you get maltose. Now these disaccharides act almost exactly like the simple sugars, the monosaccharides, in how quickly they're broken down. It gets broken down into 2 separate simple sugars or monosaccharides almost immediately in metabolism, shuttled away for energy or storage, whatever the case may be. They're found in the same foods generally where you would find monosaccharides. Fruits, some vegetables, sugar beets and sugar cane, honey, and they taste sweet, and we like them. Oligosaccharides are, like I already said, a few. It tends to be 2 to about 10 simple sugars or monosaccharides bonded together. They function very similarly in terms of how quickly they are metabolized and how they are bonded. Polysaccharides are polymers or long chains of repeated subunits that are bonded together. As you may guess, in the case of polysaccharides, that polymer is made of many repeated subunits of monosaccharides bonded together. With polysaccharides, sometimes you're looking at hundreds to thousands of bonded monosaccharides together. And when you're looking at that much, it just takes a lot longer to break that down. Think of a time-release capsule for simple sugars. That's kind of what you're getting when you get a starch or a polysaccharide. Now, short of having a genetic or a developed problem with metabolizing carbohydrates, such as diabetes or celiac disease, which is specific to a wheat protein, or like a wheat allergy. Barring any of those issues, there's only one way that consumption of carbohydrates can be problematic, and that is if you're eating refined or processed carbohydrates. So if someone were to ask me, does the typical American diet tend to include too many carbohydrates? I would need them to clarify the question, because you can't simply address carbohydrates as carbohydrates in the way that our food structure exists in America. You have clean whole carbohydrates and you have refined and processed carbohydrates. Kaela and I in a previous video talked at length about what refined and processed carbohydrates are and how the process works of refining or processing them. So I won't rehash all that in this video, but suffice it to say, America does have an overconsumption problem with refined carbohydrates. All your white bread, whether it exists in bread slices or whether it exists in rolls or whether it exists in the base of your pizza or the bookends on your sandwich, almost all the pasta, all the sodas and other sweetened drinks, all your granola bars and breakfast cereals, not to mention all the candies and pastries and cakes and cookies and pies. America, you are over-consuming refined carbohydrates, and it is causing the bulk of our health problems. So when proponents of low-carb diets, and I'll do another video very soon on low-carb diets, so watch for that. I'll be doing another collaboration with Kaela on that one. But when proponents of those lifestyles talk about how we have to limit carbs, they even come out with documentaries where they show people on their typical diet and how they need to lose weight and the health problems that they already are dealing with, whether it's overweight or one thing or another. They show their typical diet and it includes all these refined carbohydrates. Proponents of those low carbohydrate lifestyles never clarify that. They just group it as carbohydrates. You cannot conflate the health consequences of refined carbohydrates with the health consequences of clean whole carbohydrates. There is plenty in the scientific literature that discusses the detriments of overconsumption or much consumption at all of refined carbohydrates, and there is plenty in the scientific literature that iterates the health benefits of clean whole carbohydrates. The most healthy documented people on the planet are the people of Okinawa, Japan, who eat almost nothing but clean whole carbohydrates. They eat a lot of whole grain rice and they eat a lot of vegetables. That is the vast majority of their diet, and that's almost all carbohydrates. They have some protein as well. They have some lean meats in the fish that they eat and the seafood that they eat. The vast majority of what they're eating is documented to be carbohydrate. That says something for how healthy clean whole carbohydrates are. And it says something for how we cannot conflate the health consequences of clean whole carbohydrates with refined carbohydrates. So proponents of low carb lifestyles have a point when they're saying you gotta avoid all these carbs. But generally what they're pointing at is refined and processed carbs. Now, some in their community pick out wheat specifically, or in some cases grains on whole, and they break down scientifically why they believe even clean whole grains aren't good for you. And in an upcoming video, I will talk all about that too, because I call BS on that. But that's what carbs are, that's why they get a bad rap, and that's why I don't believe they deserve said bad rap. Thanks for watching this video. I hope I've answered some of your questions about what carbs are and the whole deal with carbs. If you have any questions about it, or if you take issue with anything that I've said, go ahead and leave it in the comments. Let's have a discussion about it. Otherwise, if you like this video, please smash that like button. If you think you know anybody that could benefit from what I say here, go ahead and share it with them. And please, I'd love it if you subscribe to the channel. You'll learn a lot. Hope you're having a good day. I'll see you in the next video.